Good evening and welcome to Deep Space Wine. I'm Kat, watching Deep Space Nine through for the very first time in the year 2024, some now 31 years after it first aired. And this is Tim, who watched it first in the 90s when it was syndicated to the UK. So we bring my complete naivety, but 21st century view, Tim's heart-won memories of seeing it longer ago than we care to mention. Yep. And we'll be going through it scene by scene, looking at everything there is to be analysed in it, but trying to be a little bit more conservative than we have been with it, because frankly, it's just so damn good. It is too good a TV show. There is everything to mention, and we could talk about it for many, many hours. So we're going to try not to. Is the season 2, episode 3, The Siege, which was broadcast on the 11th of October, 1993. It was directed by Winrick Colby, who wrote All Good Things, the TNG final, and it's written by Michael Piller, who is one of the 2 executive producers of Deep Space Nine.
Off the top of the episode, what did you think?
I must admit, the first time I watched it through, coming off the second episode, The Circle, which was full of intrigue, lots of quick plot changes, lots of characters who are suddenly working together, and that episode was particularly exciting. I think this one was a bit more, it felt a bit more by the numbers after I'd watched it. It just basically made all the steps that they had to get the status back to quo, which was a bit disappointing. But I kind of accepted that's the way it's got to be, it's episodic television. But watching it back and actually looking at what is in each scene, there are lots of really nice moments between the characters. There are lots of nice little hints as to what these people are like, and lots of little comedic moments which I really enjoyed. So yeah, I think it's a bit more of an action episode than I usually go for, but it's not a bad one. It's very nuts and bolts wise, it's very nicely put together, it conveys a lot of information very quickly, it's not confusing in terms of how it plays out. And yeah, it's a very serviceable episode of television, but it's still entertaining.
Yep, I absolutely agree with that assessment. My only kind of complaint really would be that for a 3-parter, because they did have, the very first in Trek's history and the last for a while as well. I was reading on Memory Alpha. It still feels to me like the ending was incredibly rushed and a little bit empty. Like I didn't feel there was a massive payoff. Maybe that's because I'm a very cynical, jaded person, and these days, if you actually walk into a government with proof of wrongdoing, people actually resign and the coup actually fails. I mean, talk about science fiction, right? That would never happen these days.
This is true.
So I wouldn't have minded seeing, a bit more, what the hell does this mean? But as you say, this is still your granddaddy's Trek, and there's still the quo to get back to.
Yeah, and I think actually now that you mention it, I think a large factor in this 3-parter is the story of Lee Nallis, although he didn't have much to do in the second episode. It's the story of the war hero who is not really a war hero.
100%.
So this episode had to wrap up, and frankly, unless they were going to get an extra cast member in, they've already got Kira as the major aboard the station. They do not need him. They've done the same thing that they do in the Star Trek films. If they introduce a new named crew member at the beginning, you know damned well that guy is going to cop it before the film is over, because they want to get the emotional beat of killing somebody, but they don't want to get rid of any of the core cast. So they introduce someone like Lee Nallis, who is important and impressive, and then, oh no, he dies, and everyone's, we're not really that upset because we've only seen him in 3 damn episodes. None of us cares.
No context for it. So I love the very ending where Kira is visibly, dealing with grief. And it's like, I get that. I get that you care about it. I don't, because I don't have anything like your exposure to this guy. Because for me, I only met him 3 hours ago, Yeah,
and he wasn't given a great deal to do. I think the actor does carry the character well. But all he has to do really is look remorseful, look a bit lost, and then look resolved. He's not.
That's it.
Apart from his one confession to Sisko, there's no emotional core to the guy.
You're absolutely
and there isn't
right.
time to build that, as well as building up all of the plot and everything else that's going on.
Not in serialised television, there isn't. So sorry, Lee Nallis, we hardly knew ye. But there it is. So yeah, I think we sounds like we both come away enjoying it, but not without our very reasonable criticisms. So I'm gonna get us started in this great scene in Ops, where Sisko is talking to his Starfleet crew, all 12 of them, which doesn't really chime with later discussions where, like, I think Bashir alone has 20 Starfleet officers with him. And I get that they can only have so many extras on screen at once, but
yeah, I think a lot of the later scenes where they've got a large team with them, they happen in narrow corridors where you can conveniently only see 2 or 3 people in the shot. But also, it's Sisko giving a speech to people who are not just his core ops team. I think they've made the decision they're going to have a lot of extras here to build up that feeling that there are a lot of people aboard this station. It feels less empty than when you've got 5 people standing around going, all of the hundreds of family members and other crew. No, we've suddenly got far more Federation crew than we've ever had.
Yeah, you've never seen some of these people before. And to be fair, you probably won't see them again, but it is setting the scene. And, I like this scene. I did like it. It showed Sisko connecting with everyone under his command. It felt real, and I like it whenever a Star Trek captain does that thing where I'm going to do something that's against the rules. Starfleet has told me not to do the thing. I'm going to do the thing, saving my knowledge that as a captain, nothing's actually bad's going to happen to me. But he gives his crew the choice, and of course they all choose to stay with him. So, no, I enjoyed that.
It's good, and we've got a good picture of somebody with a quiff. We don't get much variety in terms of Federation hairdos, but I thought this one was a particularly nice one.
Loved it. Fantastic kind of what would hair in the future look like from the perspective of 1993, and it's great. It's huge, and Anson Mount as Captain Pike, he's also going for verticality, so clearly it is a theme.
Yeah. This is the future. I particularly, she's wearing a kind of Horn of Plenty style quiff.
Oh, Horn of
built
Plenty.
Built up in a circle. Yeah, it's delightful. But yes, I think Sisko ends his speech by saying that non-Bajorans won't be safe here.
No.
Our children have to be evacuated, I believe. Many of the Bajorans we've worked with will want to leave too, and the assault vessels are going to arrive in less than 5 hours. Very tense. 7 opening credits. Is there anything else about that first scene?
I think the only thing I would say is Bashir is, bizarrely for him, poised, alert, intent. He has a very serious expression on his face. He correctly observes that no provisional government, no invitation to the Federation. It's great. He doesn't stick his foot in his own mouth once in this whole scene.
He does seem remarkably competent.
Right?
Is this our Bashir?
Damning indictment. What a damning indictment.
So the next shot is of people descending a spiral stairwell on the promenade. Lots of people moving, people carrying bags, alien suitcases, which are just briefcases with extra bits stuck on. There are a couple of Bolians. Mr. Mott, the Next Generation barber, was a Bolians. We've got a couple of blue people with a kind of seam down the front of their head.
Oh, indeed, there they are. Looking good.
Yeah. We then have a really nice little scene between Quark and Rom. Quark has realised that with lots of people trying to evacuate the ship and only 3 tiny runabouts, there are seats to be sold. And I really like this. It sets up... I think it's already been established that Rom is a foil to Quark. Rom wants a fairer world for himself and for others.
Heretical.
At first he thinks that Quark is being compassionate when he notes that, yes, there are a lot of people who are going to have to stay behind. That's a shame. But no, Quark just wants to make a quick dollar. Quark asks Rom, do you think I would actually sacrifice my brother's life? And he then glances away. There's a blonde woman passing by. Quark glances her up and down while continuing, for profit. And Rom just nods enthusiastically. Yes, you damn well would. But no, Quark's trying to draw him in and say, no, we're going to make money together, which for Quark is actually kind of sweet. He's bringing his brother in on it rather than saying, look, you stay behind and keep... Because he could have said, stay behind and keep running the bar for all the people that are going to stay. He could have insisted that Rom stay to keep the family business going.
Absolutely.
But he doesn't. They're both going to make a load of cash off selling seats to desperate people.
I just love that line, it would have to be a lot of Latin, and it will be the deal of a lifetime, and Rom gets an immediate, my lifetime. Perfect. Perfect setup, perfect delivery.
Rom is really quick in this scene. I feel as if they're giving Rom far more shrift. Probably from this episode onwards, I'm hoping.
Then we head up to the top of the promenade for a wonderful scene between Nog and Jake, where they learn that they are on different evacuation ships going to different locations, and it's a total flip of their personalities. Jake is distracted, short-tempered, worried, and Nog is diplomatic, placatory, empathic. It's such a reversal of their roles.
You're right, actually. I hadn't picked up on that, but yeah, you're very right. Jake is very concerned, and Nog is the one reassuring him and looking on the bright side, trying to find alternatives. Yeah, that is really nice.
I loved it. He gets that fantastic line, has there ever been a human like me, like you, and a Ferengi like me who's ever been friends. And if, our dads can't split us up, no pesky coup
d'etat. It's French. No French
no
thing's
French
gonna
thing.
do it either.
It's brilliant. They have maybe 5 lines each, and they turn that scene into solid gold. And it is a testament to the strength of both actors that they did that, being young, very young men. And it's just brilliant. Love that scene.
I'm really glad that they had that in there, as
Yeah.
well as the scene between Jake and his dad, because they could have opted for, well,
one
Jake's
or
got
the
2
other.
goodbye scenes now. We've only got so much time, but that they went for both is really nice.
It deepens it. It deepens the emotional connection, and for me, it ratchets up the tension in a kind of, the people you know and care about are getting torn apart. It's horrendous. It really makes you care. So no,
You're right.
That.
It does feel like there are real consequences to everyone having to leave the station. It isn't in the real world. We know it's just they bugger off the station and come back again the week after. But yeah, in world, it really means something that these two are going to be split up, and they care about it deeply.
Love it. Absolutely love it. And we carry on with the disruption to people's lives. We go to the O'Brien's quarters, where Keiko and Molly are getting ready to leave, and obviously Miles is staying behind.
Yeah, and Keiko is understandably upset, angry, holding a lot of frustration about this, because he's making the choice to stay. He could decide to come with her and Molly, and instead he's staying to defend the station. And his reason given is, we can't just let the Cardis have the wormhole, in with the old racial slur, O'Brien. But yes, in terms of strategy, he knows that they have to defend this place, and he is one of the best set up people to do it because of his knowledge of the station, the tech aboard it. So yeah, he walks them both to the airlock, still carrying Molly, who very sweetly at one point says, "Is Daddy coming with us?" No, child.
I must away to war.
Yes, precisely.
Which is also in keeping, we know, and we are reminded later on, O'Brien is a veteran of previous conflicts the Federation has had with the Cardassians. He has a unique perspective amongst the crew in that he knows what it's like to fight Cardassians, except for Kira. And even then, Kira's Bajoran experience of fighting Cardassians is not the same as the Federation, who were in a proper stand-up shooting war with the Cardassians. So you can understand why he absolutely feels that he, as a good old soldier, has to stay with his commanding officer, defend his home, all of that. But it's great. He is the perfect person as well to show that contrast. I have a life, I have a family, I have all these expectations. I did think this was just a job that I could clock off at the end of the day, and now you want me to hide in the air ducts and shoot at people. That wasn't in the job description, but for O'Brien it is. So it's the perfect contrast for him to have to choose between those 2 points, and they do it well. Because of course they do, because Rosalind Chow is a brilliant guest actor, criminally underused.
I agree. I'm very glad that before this episode takes place, they have set up that she is a character with her own agency rather than just being O'Brien's wife. Because for this episode, you could be forgiven for thinking that's all there is to her. She doesn't have any time to do anything else. She's just there to express her displeasure that her husband has chosen to stay behind. But we know that she's a teacher. She's got her own philosophy of how she wants to teach. She's willing to stand up to authorities to maintain that philosophy.
That's right.
She's a really good character. And I'm aware that the Irishman is going to suffer more before this show ends. I really hope that his wife gets some decent material in the midst of that happening, and that she isn't just always there in the background waiting for him to come home. Because it's set up such that she can have some good plots of her own, but I don't know that it's going to happen. But yes, the next scene is in Ops. Dax has scanned every subspace communication window to find a frequency for Bajor, and they've got them all jammed. Kira's saying that they'll have to physically carry the proof to the Chamber of Ministers. Lee is useful here. He suggests that there's the Luna 5 base where there are some impulse raiders left underground from a decade ago. And I really like that. I like they've actually emphasized that for all that his reputation was founded on, not so much a lie as a mistake.
Misunderstanding.
He isn't the hero that they think he is, but he was nonetheless a rebel. The reason he was there was because he was actively rebelling against the Cardassians. He wasn't there by accident. So I like that they brought up that he does have some real world knowledge that can be helpful here.
It's like we're desperately panning for any nugget of Lee actually being helpful. And I feel like the script writers were like, we haven't actually had Lee do anything proactive for a bit. Let's just write him a line where he says something helpful.
We also find out about one of Dax's previous hosts, which I think this is the first time that they've done this, where Sisko asks whether any of Dax's previous hosts has good working knowledge of engine coils.
I think you're right.
And she says, yes, Tobin Dax, who had very little imagination but was fantastic with engines. And I'm glad that they don't do that more often, or haven't yet, because it could just become a damn MacGuffin whenever they need an expert in something. Dax, one of your previous lives was an expert in... So I'm glad I hope this is one of the few times they do that, because it could so easily have become a mechanic for the character, and I feel like it's deliberate that they haven't.
You noted that obviously Tobin had no imagination. You also didn't know that he had no sex life, which is the weirdest judgment I just didn't get where that came from. It came out of nowhere, and also he didn't fuck enough. And I'm like, whoa, what the hell are you talking about? What's that got to do with anything?
Yes. I guess it's a hint at now Dax compared with then Dax. It's Jadzia Dax.
I mean...
May fuck. Probably not going to fuck Bashir, but...
yeah, I guess. It just seems like just so weirdly heavy and clumsy to just be like, and also, what a nerd.
It is a weird thing to have included. It's not relevant.
It's not relevant. And I don't know if they were just like, let's jazz things up and make them a bit more adult. And it hit me like a sack of spuds. I'm like, what on earth has that got to do with anything? But,
Right.
Yes.
Odo brings Quark in. Quark's yelling, I have no time for this foolishness. I still have to pack. And Odo explains what Quark has been doing. And I love the way that Quark summarizes it. All I can say is that my business is to find preferred seating for a select list of clients, which is exactly how a capitalist would phrase it. It's that kind of euphemistic. I'm providing an excellent service for people rather than people's lives need saving and I'm going to charge them for the privilege.
It's brilliantly written and it's in the right mouth as well. I mean, nobody can deliver it like Armin Shimmerman. Just spectacular delivery. And then obviously
Sisko grabs him by the throat with both hands.
Wow.
Which I love.
I mean, this for me was a real turning point. I'm like, this is not Captain Jean-Luc Picard. This is somebody else. I already got it, when he socked Q full in the face, but this is something else.
I don't know. I'm having a horrifying memory of a time when Picard grabs a deaf man and shouts in his face.
Oh, God.
Picard did sometimes grab people.
Yeah,
it's horrible.
I forgot about that,
but not very often. But frankly, I think doing the same to Quark is somewhat different. Quark is deeply annoying to the ops team every single episode, and they're remarkably restrained with him. But like, there's just put him down. Quark plays the culture card, going, "It's an accepted Ferengi transit practice."
Which is the perfect way to try and get the Federation off your back. They're great respecters of other cultures. You can't strangle me for a cultural observation. That's against your laws.
It's extremely cynical, but I do feel that the showrunners are not on his side in this. They're saying he is being far too cynical about this. This scene ends with a beautiful little dialogue between Odo and Quark, which I love. Quark is on his way out of the room and he turns and calls, "Hey, Odo, you'll miss me. You know you will. Say it." And there is no non-romantic or non-kink explanation for that line. Why does Quark need to hear Odo say that he's going to miss him? There is no that's not a standard part of friendship. I love that so much. And Odo says, "I'll miss you, Quark." And Quark is really kind of surprised. Please. Odo continues, "I'll miss the aggravation, the petty theft, the bad manners." And Quark just interrupts him with, "Odo, take care of yourself," and then laughs heartily as he descends in the turbo lift.
That chuckle as he slides out of view, brilliant. I mean, this is in the last episode when he was talking about getting compensation as the camera slid out of view. They use those lifts in ops brilliantly, and it complements just such a heartfelt, believable laugh from Armin Shimmerman as Quark. It's spectacular. It is the icing on a great scene,
It's gorgeous. And then the extra cherry on top of that, the shooting script says, Odo shrugs it off, but the subtext is there. He will miss him. So as Bashir, I think there's Bashir and a couple of security guards standing on at the airlock, and Lenalis appears from nowhere and just says, "Where are you running to?" And silence falls. And we've got a brilliant picture of Lenalis speaking to the Bajorans, and Morn in the background just gazing at him in awe. It's delightful.
There it is. It's a great scene. I love it. I love that they give Bashir, again, responsibility. He's there looking after the evacuees, and he does it well, clearly. Sisko tried to calm the crowd. They're not listening, and it's actually time for Lee to get his second proactive moment of his entire life. And he actually does calm them with a reasonable speech, which I did enjoy. I did think, okay, this makes sense. This would work, I think.
Yeah, it gives it's an almost entirely Bajoran crowd around him, and he emphasizes these ships are for our guests, who must leave because it's no longer safe for them here. But we are Bajorans. I say that we stay and solve our own problems together. They are quickly won over, and I think for someone who hasn't been demonstrated to be very good with rhetoric, Linus hasn't really had a speech like that before. He does a good job. He delivers the speech well, and he is very persuasive. So whether he's done it by watching Sisko, perhaps, he's got the skill from somewhere.
Definitely.
And oh, bless him, Jake says, I really think it'd be better if I stayed. Look, I just don't want anything to happen to you. Which, I love their relationship so much. Jake is genuinely concerned for his dad, and Sisko will not have lied to him about this situation. He knows what danger his dad's going to be in. But Sisko hugs him, says, and that just says, that makes two of us. And then he hands a letter to Jake for him to read after he's left. And Jake says he'll read it as soon as he gets aboard, and Sisko says, no, wait a while. And you just know he's handing him this in case these are the last words of his that he ever gets to read. It's a really impressive moment, and delivered very quickly.
Very quickly, and obviously, as we know as well, crucially, not followed up on. We don't learn what's in it, and that's fine. It shouldn't be. We can then just imagine it and just know this happened. It's very important to them. You don't need the detail. You just need to know that it happened.
That is a very good point, though. There are a couple of times, at least two in the shooting script, where it just says scene omitted. So I wonder whether there was a scene or two aboard the shuttle. There might have been one of Jake unfolding the letter and reading it, and they had to cut it for time. But yes, we never actually find out what, or we don't in this episode find out what's in that letter. But it's a really sweet moment when he hands it over, and then Sisko takes Jake's face in both of his hands and then hugs him again and says, I'll see you in a couple of weeks. And then the gear doors roll shut in opposite directions because the design is just beautiful.
You love them. Absolutely love them.
And just after they've closed, Quark arrives yelling, no, wait, dragging a really heavy suitcase behind him.
Clinks really noticeably with that indescribably obvious sound of money.
Oh, so there's Bashir and Sisko still standing outside the airlock door, everyone else having left. And Quark explains, my ship, the Rio Grande, my brother's on it. And Bashir says, no, that ship was full. Quark's name wasn't on the list. I checked it myself. And Bashir says his brother Rom did go aboard, but it was with a Dabo girl.
The ultimate...
And good for you, Rom.
The ultimate reversal. It came out of nowhere. Everybody thought Rom was an idiot. No, Rom's been quietly learning. No, and he has pulled a move, and Rom can indeed get it, by all accounts. Amazing.
It's gorgeous. They didn't have to have it in there, and they put it in there. I love them for that. And we don't get to see those two reuniting later. I've got no idea how that conversation went down because Rom is still employed by Quark. Poor Rom.
It's true.
But yes, the scene fades on Quark sitting on his suitcase after Bashir and Sisko have just turned on their heels and walked away from him, and he's just shouting into the empty ship, into the empty station, just saying, "Call the ships back! I'll pay anyone 5 bars of gold pressed latinum for a seat. 10 bars, 20." It's kind of existentially horrifying. You suddenly realise that this is a situation that money cannot get him out. He's still offering ridiculously low amounts, given that he's got a suitcase full. But yeah, money cannot save him here. He's actually in real danger now. Yeah, it's dark.
It is. Thankfully, it's only happened to somebody who really deserves it. So, you don't feel too bad about it, but a good point.
This is very true. But yes, we then get an exterior of DS9, the Bajoran shuttle arriving at the docking ring, joining two.
It's a nice. The thing I like this shot actually. It shows one flying over the docking ring, 2 more connecting in. It's nice, It's just a nice quick shot that shows you the station as you don't normally see it, with ships around it that you don't normally see. So I liked it.
And it is, and the storytelling is just really good. It's only a few seconds of shot, but you get to see one of them arriving, the 2 others already docked, and you immediately know what's going on.
Absolutely.
It's very effective. So yeah, the airlock door rolls open. We get Bajorans in military uniform, all of them wearing an earring, not like the security staff of Deep Space Nine. They've actually earringed them all up, and they're all wielding Bajoran-style phasers. Colonel Day remarks, "No resistance at all. Minister Jaro's prediction was correct. The Federation has tucked its tail between its legs," which implies that Bajor has a creature similar to a dog, which tucks its tail between its legs when it is frightened.
It's never mentioned, to my knowledge.
You know that Palookas don't have Palookas don't have. I knew I was going to do this. Palookas don't
Whatever
have
they are.
Spider creatures. But yes, from the shooting script, there's a short explanatory paragraph about General Krim and Colonel Day. As they slowly move down the thoroughfare, it's worth mentioning a bit about Day and Krim. Krim is purely a professional military man, a Rommel, not interested in politics, but understands his role and responsibility in the coup. Day is far more political and is Jaro's eyes and ears in this operation, more like an SS attaché. There is always a subtle tension between these two. Day thinks Krim is arrogant, but knows he needs the support of the military. And I thought it's interesting that the military references that the scriptwriter draws on are about the Nazis, particularly given that the Cardassians have previously been the Nazi allegories in the show. I think it's just an artifact of the two world wars being sort of the most studied wars to Western writers who aren't necessarily military scholars. I think those are just the characters, the figures that they are most familiar with. So it's the obvious ones to reference rather than implying that the Circle are a strict allegory. But it was interesting that the scriptwriter included that bit of explanation about what the dynamic is between those characters.
That is interesting. I guess that was possibly more for the benefit of the directors and the casting people.
Yeah, I think for the casting people and for the two actors playing the characters, just this is the dynamic between you two, and I think that does play across quite clearly. Perhaps mostly because Sisko has already met Krim, and the two respected each other despite their differences. So it's nicely set up, and I really appreciate that they didn't have just a straight up all of the Bajorans who are with the Circle are evil. They have deliberately included those shades of grey. You've got Krim who is doing the wrong thing, has joined the wrong side, but he's more pragmatic. He's going to think through what the situation is, and he can change his response, whereas Day is just 100% committed.
100%, yeah. And I'm just going to shout out as well, the actor who plays Day does it brilliantly. Within about 30 seconds, I was like, I hate this guy. He's a prick. Oh my God. I immediately took against him, and it's a credit to the actor that he made me immediately hate Colonel Day.
Yeah, he's played by Stephen Webber. Before the scene ends, Krim says that this is the most strategic position in the entire sector at the mouth of the wormhole. Had I been a Federation commander, I would not have abandoned it so easily. There are no life signs aboard. They haven't seen any indication that there's anyone still there, but he suspects that Sisko must still be there, because from what he knows of Sisko wouldn't have abandoned his post.
Good foreshadowing.
And at the end of the scene, we see a point of view shot from our characters. We see through the wire mesh of the floor on the upper level, and then we get a shot of O'Brien, Lee Nallis, and Sisko crouching together looking down. And Sisko and Miles are not in the Federation uniform, while Lee is still in his Bajoran uniform. They're wearing civvies now, and I'm not exact. I assume that's just because the Federation have officially withdrawn, and if they engage the Bajorans, they cannot be seen to be doing so on behalf of the Federation, because they're doing it with zero permission.
Precisely. That was my impression as well. Great end to the scene as well, and again, it's just a quick creative use of, let's build a little bit of extra set and show people a camera view they've never seen before. Let's make it clear that this is weird and different and the stakes are high. Loved it.
Now, we get a shot of Luna 5 large on the screen, seen from space. We have a picture of this. It's not actually, I wasn't too keen on this shot because we've just got one large round thing on the screen, and it isn't clear whether it's Bajor or one of its moons. It would have been nice to have had the planet of Bajor, one of the moons, and then the shuttle coming down towards the moon. But I suspect that for scale, they couldn't do that. They couldn't have a moon that was big enough to read on the screen and a model small enough to look right while big. I think it was a problem of the station has to be so big. The shuttles have to be scaled up to the station, so they just couldn't. They couldn't do it. So it's not entirely clear that it's Luna 5 they're heading to rather than Bajor.
I think that's reasonable. Yeah.
We then cut to a cavern, which feels very natural and fusty. I suspect it's the same set that we had for the Circles set of caves last time, which had a very high ceiling.
I would say so.
Kira remarks that a year ago she was living in a camp like this, which surprised me because we know that the Deep Space Nine crew have only been aboard for a year, and I thought she had a pre-existing working relationship with Odo. Was it while she was a rebel that she conspired with Odo, or was she working a book? Because if a year ago she was in a cave, when did she and Odo actually meet?
We shall see.
Okay, to be discovered at a later date. I just feel there's a little bit of conflict there between what we know about the timeline already and what we've just been told.
100%. It will be explored, but I do think they're largely on course, which is that yes, Kira was, up until the actual Cardassian withdrawal, she was a resistance fighter up until the very last minute, and we know it's barely been a year since the withdrawal and the start of season 1, so that sort of tracks. But I can't say that it'll stay in place for the whole show, knowing what we know about any fictional creation and sufficiently rambling timelines.
Enough writers on a show, and you can create any number of different paths for the characters.
You call everything a Stardate. It could have happened any time. It could have happened yesterday. It could have happened 200 years ago. It was just on Stardate X. I don't know when that was.
Andy. But yes, continuing this scene, in this episode, Dax is far more shaken and far more, I think she's far more colloquial. She's less Spock-like in this episode than we've seen her before. She reacts emotionally to more things. And I think a kind of in-universe justification for this is that she's no longer on the station. She is Federation staff and has been for presumably a long time.
Yeah.
She's used to working within a system. She's used to, things breaking down, but having protocols, being surrounded by equipment that she knows well. Here she's on a rebel base with Kira, who is accustomed to that surroundings. Dax is not. She doesn't spend time in insect-riddled caverns, and she is not very happy to be here. As they're walking through, Dax says, let's see. I think so. Oh, yes. Have I mentioned how allergic trills are to insect bites? The biochemical connections between host and symbiont can't tolerate that. What's that? Is that a spider or a dog? And then we get a shot which we have a picture of a Paluku.
Yeah. There it is.
It's a spider that's the size of a dog.
Yes, it is. It is. I did read on the Memory Alpha article that this was a mechanical spider toy that one of the SFX designers had just seen at a yard sale and bought for about $2.
That's adorable.
Yeah, and they just glued some fake fur on it, and they ran it into Rick Berman's office to say, we can use this, and they were like, it's great. Turns out it doesn't actually go quite as fast here, and they may have sped up this scene because it only goes about 2 miles an hour. So when it scuttles away at high speed, it may have been a little bit of camera trickery.
Benny Hill music. But yes, Dax is not happy about them. Says, I suppose you used to make them your pets and sing songs about them round the campfire. Kira says, no, we used to eat them.
And then they cut away immediately. Dax barely had time for an O, and then we're on to the next thing. And at that point, I realised this episode is absolutely flying. There were so many little bombs being dropped, and then we're on to the next thing. I loved it. What great, snappy writing. And it's such a real double-take moment. No, we used to eat them. And it's like no time to really kind of pass that. You're on. I loved it.
They then arrive in a large cave, a large space, a large cavern with a small shuttle in it.
There it is.
Which I really like. I like that they've clearly got a large set. I imagine that some of the upper stages of it and some of the light is probably CG'd in. But I think they did use the same cave, which genuinely has a high ceiling space. They've done a really good job of how it looks.
Agreed.
They approach the raider. I keep forgetting the term for it.
I think, anything like that works.
Yeah, but Dax is skeptical that it'll fly, but Kira assures her I've been in a lot worse. When Kira opens the raider, she has to brush away loads of cobwebs, which shows that it's been there for a long time and it's commensurate with the spider things being there. Dax says, I guess the Bajoran resistance must have had a lot shorter pilots. And Kira says, no, just short engineers. They were always building these things without thinking. I'm wondering if they built this damn thing and then realised that poor Terry Farrell is over 6 foot tall. And this poor actor is having to squeeze into this tiny little shuttle. and she doesn't fit. The character bangs her head at one point. It's made light of, right? I do wonder whether that was a behind-the-scenes thing that they had to write in to explain why Dax looks so uncomfortable.
I would love that to be the case, and it would not surprise me at all, because I can imagine they build a set and then they're like, right, can the actors actually use this? They can't? Well, that's too bad.
The engineers built it without thinking.
This is it. We've spent the money on it. There is no more money. You're getting in the set. Okay, all right, fair enough. But it's great.
It's really good. He remarks that the thrusters weren't easy to get going when they were being used every day, so it'll probably be even more difficult now that it's been out of use for many years. Dax says that she doesn't need to worry about that. Kira says, are you sure? And Dax says, yep. I've got no intention of getting stuck here eating palakus. Which again, just a nice little humorous note to end the scene on. The next scene, we're in Ops. The turbo lift rises into the room with 4 Bajorans in it, Day, Krim, and 2 others. Day says that they should inform Minister Jarrow of their success immediately, and Krim says that he is too eager to receive Jarrow's plaudits. Krim asks a member of staff to scan the operations center for organic material because the station's security officer is apparently missing. He tells her to scan it 6 times an hour at random intervals, which suggests that Odo can only be picked up when he is in some organic form. If he's pretending to be a painting or a glass or whatever, he just scans as that object. They can't pick him up.
I think that's a good theory. But Colonel Day ignores Krim's instructions and just calls up Jarrow, which it's a massive, breach of the chain of command, so it's a real dick move.
Yeah, Day's being a knob. Day smarmily approaches the comm screen and tells him that they've encountered no resistance so far. And he and Jarrow start discussing the Federation's withdrawal before Krim interrupts and says, Minister, I urge caution. The battle for this station hasn't even begun yet. And he tells him he's not convinced that they ever left, that this internal security net has been sabotaged. They've got no way of tracking the movements of anyone on board, which suggests that someone did not want to be found. Jarrow asks if that person is Kira. Krim says that Odo and Lee Nallis are also unaccounted for. And it's at this point that Jarrow says that Lee Nallis would never have abandoned Bajor. He must still be there. Let me re-emphasize that you are to take every necessary step to keep Lee Nallis alive. Dead, he's a martyr. Alive, he seals our victory, which suggests that he's going to coerce Lee into giving a statement supporting the Circle if they do catch him.
100%.
We then get a really nice couple of shots here. Pictures 8 and 9. We get the voice of Vedek Winn. Once the call has ended, Vedek Winn says over his shoulder, once you have him, Lee will see the wisdom of giving you his support. While he's in the call, the camera is set low, and then it pans up to see that Winn is sitting just behind Jarrow.
There she is. Oh, no, it's...
Oh, she's great. So sinister.
It's great, and it reminds you that there is a real web of espionage, of deceit and political maneuvering going on, and it's great because it reminds you the scope of this. This isn't just bad guys trying to take over the station. This is, on the surface, it looks like a perfectly political reality that the Bajorans would want to take the station back. It is theirs. They only asked Starfleet to help run it. So this is that horrible, cynical trappings of approval and authority. Look, all these authority figures involved. None of this could possibly be wrong. And you suddenly realise we are utterly at the mercy of spiderweb spinners like Winn and Jarrow. It's great. I love it. I hate it, but I love it.
It really is. I think you mentioned earlier about how much politics has changed and how reasonable they look now compared with what we deal with nowadays. And I think that at this point in the 90s, Jarrow is the kind of politician that seemed to be most dangerous. He is conspiratorial. He's very clever. He's good at presenting himself. He is very professional in his bearing, and he's a very quick thinker. And that was the kind of Francis Urquhart House of Cards.
Excellent comparison. Yes.
Whereas now we know that incompetence can rise as high as the US presidency.
Yes.
And we didn't know that was an option before. We assumed there was something that would stop that. So frankly, Jarrow looks like I don't know, I feel more comfortable watching someone like Jarrow than I do watching modern politics play out, because it feels familiar. It feels like, this is how it actually happens. And these people can actually they're achieving things, and it makes sense that they're achieving what they're achieving. Sorry, a very dark thought for a Monday evening.
This is exactly what the show is meant to do. But who would have thought that a 30-year-old sci-fi TV show would, present a better view of politics than actual politics? It boggles the mind that, on our side of the pond, we have very diverse politicians who have risen to be members of Parliament on the back of stoking up, cultural wars, of outright deceits. It happens to us. It is happening across the Western world, this rush to the extreme to support a candidate who represents roughly your point of view, regardless of how potentially insane they are. So this thought of a clever, competent politician scheming to control your life rather than just kind of muscling their way in.
Like, at least he's capable of that.
Right? We didn't know how good we had it. But anyway, you're right.
I think it is a big cultural shift in the way that we view villains and the way that we view politicians and what they can be.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, moving on.
Yes,
Jared says, yes, I think they have a quick discussion. Winn says that he has the unique ability to build a consensus. Bajor's been waiting for a leader like him, and he says leaders like us, and he reassures her that as soon as he says 26 hours, which is the length of the Bajoran day, after he's sworn into office, he'll direct the Vedek Assembly to elect her Kai. Together we will rebuild Bajor. We fade out on her smiling, which is always a horrible sight.
Make Bajor great again. I'm sorry.
Pretty much.
Mm-hmm.
We then go back to the cabin where the Raider thruster is firing. We cut to Kira in the pilot seat, and then Dax working at the engine, which has smoke pouring out of it. Dax says, "Thank you, Tobin," because she's managed to get it working.
Yes.
Dax then bangs her head on the ceiling, and Kira reminds her, "Knees!" She's to tuck her knees in. Dax asks, "How did you ever win a war in these things?" And Kira responds, "We were the insects, Lieutenant. The Cardassians were just as allergic as trills," which is actually a really nice little tie into the conversation earlier. That's a really sweet little thematic note to put in there. Kira asks if the proximity system is working, and Dax bashes it with a fist and says, "I think so." I noticed there are still no seatbelts. This is a tiny fighter jet which is meant to fly at all angles, and there's nothing to hold you in your seat apart from G-force.
Star
the
Trek.
seats, I think, are just made of metal. It's so uncomfortable.
There are no safety regulations in this universe. People just don't get them at all. I think you will see some. I think they come up in Voyager, but I'll say no more about that. So that is... It
is just interesting that in a world where I feel that people are very much the focus, people are cared for, health and safety isn't given a look in
Not a bit.
They've got turbo lifts that can take your fingers off, and every single ship with nothing to stop you flying out of your seat.
Drama. You've got to engage the drama controls.
Right, we are now back in Sisko's office where Krim and Day are having a conversation. Krim says you're playing right into their hands, and Day is frustrated. "If you're so convinced they're here, how can you sit and wait for them to attack?" And Krim says they have no interest in attacking. He picks up Sisko's baseball from his desk and he very carefully holds it. He isn't cavalier with it. He doesn't kind of throw it around or bounce it off anything. He just carefully holds it and looks at it. And he says, "Because I understand military tactics, they are vastly outnumbered. If we divide our forces," and then suddenly the lights power down with the zoom. But it has just occurred to me that probably the reason he's holding the ball that way is because he doesn't know that it's for sports. He has no idea what this thing is for. So rather than tossing it and catching it the way Sisko does, he's just holding it carefully because it is an ornament.
Exactly. Again, we've pointed out several times, but nobody else in this universe knows what the hell Ben Sisko is talking about when he makes baseball references. With the exception of his son, that's it. That's the only other person he could talk baseball with. He imagined a character from baseball to come to life in the episode where things came to life because nobody else can talk to him about baseball. But there it is.
Apart from Dax, who doesn't like doing it.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Dax doesn't want to.
Than he let on.
Poor Sisko, yes.
But yes, the lights then zoom down.
Yes.
I wish I had a name for it. The female staff member arrived saying the primary sensor array was sabotaged. As soon as we tested it, the subnet shot it out. Krim looks back down at the baseball, I think smiling slightly because he's been proved
Mm-hmm.
right. They says, you can let your engineers play with the machines. I'm sending out search parties, and Krim remained in Sisko's seat holding the baseball. We then cut to one of the conduits where Maz O'Brien, an unknown staff member, and Lee and Sisko are sitting. This is a really sweet little scene. O'Brien says, eat hearty, the replicators crash in 16 minutes, which is a nice touch. They've planned out when each system is going to go down. And they're currently eating combat rations. Sisko asks if he couldn't have made something more palatable. A French onion soup would have been really nice. And just a little Italian hand gesture. Which I just love. It's just crowbarring in that little bit about Sisko. He enjoys his food. When he orders things from replicators, he gets fancy ass coffees and cakes, and when he eats his rations he wants French onion soup. Damn it.
That's great. This whole sequence though is brilliant. It shows an interplay between the characters that I just found so refreshing. They joke with each other. They have a dark humor in the face of adversity, which Quark later comments on. I'm the only one that doesn't find this funny, and it's like they find it funny because they have to. It's how they deal with this kind of stressful situation, and the banter is great. I think this is the first time that O'Brien calls Bashir Julian.
Yes! After he decided that he wasn't going to, suddenly he's doing it again. They're friends now.
And it's after Bashir's dreadful joke, which is chief, or should I call you chef? And it's like, I get that you're developing a character, but let's just leave the jokes a little bit longer, shall we, Bashir? Because that was a bit of a stinker.
Oh, that's cringe Bashir, though. That's Bashir as we know and love him. But
yeah,
it's beautiful. And Bashir's ribbing him, saying that when he was a medical student, he created a candy bar that had a far better nutritional profile than these combat rations. I love it. And it is for the sake of the characters remaining okay in the face of danger. It's also for the sake of the audience. We're kept entertained during an episode that could have been non-stop tension from lots of different fronts. Instead, we get these bits of character building and these moments of humor. It's really, I appreciate it a great deal. Odo sticks himself out of a wall after they passed and says a 5-man unit is about to begin a search of the cargo deck. And I've gone, hang about, his work comm badge is a part of him. The comm badge is functioning, and it's a part of him that can melt into other things, and it works. On a molecular level, he's constructed a comm badge from himself.
Don't pull on this thread.
Oh my God.
Do not pull on this thread. It's all going to unravel.
Guy. I mean, he can't build a working nose, but he can build a working comm badge.
It just does not make any sense. I'm sure by now you've gathered that the rules around comm badges in general in Star Trek don't make a lot of sense. Either you tap it to shut it off, or you don't, or you're still on the call with somebody. Can other people hear you? How do you pick up? There's
a moment here where Sisko calls through to a specific room and he doesn't specify who he's calling to first. It just happens. Plot.
Engage the plot drive.
But yes, Bashir is really on it this episode. He says that puts the Bajorans are closest to him, the patrol that Odo has told them about. O'Brien says maybe we should send someone with a little more experience, someone who can run the show, like Lee. And Sisko quickly goes, no, I need him here with us, which is covering Lee's back as much as it is.
It really is.
Expressing that Bashir is
capable. Goes in an eye blink, but it is there to say, actually, I don't think Lee could run this. Because you get like 2 seconds of thing on Lee's face where he's just like looking a bit trepidatious. I'm just like, okay.
Because he has got experience, but the impression we have is that he hasn't got sufficient experience. He isn't used to running the show. He was a soldier rather than a leader.
Yeah.
Sisko tells Bashir to move your unit to cargo bay 6. You know what to do. And he says, and let me re-emphasize, which bugs me because earlier in the episode, Krim says, let me re-emphasize. It's just an odd little re-emphasize. It's just an unusual word. I think the writers accidentally used the same word twice.
I think you're right.
It does. They do mean the right thing by it. I mean, I've told you this before. I'm telling you again. But I just picked up 2 different people say it.
And it is a clunky word. You're right.
Sorry, it was Jaro said it earlier.
No,
but yes, Sisko says, let me re-emphasize it. Use deadly force only if absolutely necessary. Emphasizing that our guys are the good guys. They're not looking to kill any of the Bajoran soldiers. Quark wishes Bashir happy hunting and stays put. The script has Quark then picking up someone else's unfinished ration and eating it. And Armin Shimmerman actually does do that, but because there are other people exiting the tiny corridor at the same time, you can't see it. He is doing it, he reaches out his hand and picks something up, but then someone passes in front of him. Just these tiny little comic moments that are lost because of the practicalities of shooting.
Thank you again for the shooting script. It is wonderful backgrounder that we wouldn't have got. We are the podcast that gives you more.
That we stole from the internet. The next scene, we're in Cargo Base 6, where the Bajoran soldiers are just arriving. Bashir then calls down from somewhere above them, "I wouldn't get too close to that, it's thorium isotope," and then kicks through a ceiling panel to reveal himself holding a phaser. I'm betting that Bashir really enjoyed that moment. This is the kind of spy nonsense that he wants to do. This is what he wanted when Garak started talking to him, as well as to have sex with Garak. And he's... Yeah. Delightfully, other crew members then pop out of wall panels and barrels to surprise the Bajorans. It's just a really nice little scene of lots of people popping out of the woodwork. It's beautiful.
And Bashir finally gets his one-liner. Prolonged exposure to technobabble can have very nasty consequences. That's amazing. What a tour de force Bashir gets in this episode. He gets so many opportunities.
Beautiful. He's hyper competent as well. It's like he did. I would have. It's probably because I've seen too many Whedon shows. I would have expected him to deliver the one-liner, either get it wrong or it falls flat, and he has to then explain it. I think that's what his character archetype would do in a Joss Whedon show. But here it just goes right. He gets to have his moment. It's great.
I think you're absolutely right. And I'm grateful for that, actually, because yes, I would have seen that happen and gone, yeah, that's what happened. So it is a nice version of that trope, and it will also be made up for, because I know for a fact Bashir is going to stick his foot in it somewhere else, so no problem. Or we'll return to the status quo.
Yes, Bashir. Yes, the Bajoran soldiers drop their weapons. Bashir calls through to Sisko. "Mission accomplished. We have our first 5 prisoners of war." Sisko then winks at O'Brien, the silent female member of staff next to him. This poor woman who's there tight in this little conduit with O'Brien and Sisko, and she's emoting her face off, and she doesn't have a name.
Yeah, criminal.
So thank you, named guest actress. You did a great job. We get another shot of the Raider, the small shuttle that Kira and Dax are in, which is now in space, and it turns and flies over the camera. It's a very nice little dramatic shot. Kira says that they're preparing to enter orbit of Bajor. Dax is upset that the navigational sensors are not functioning, but Kira is unfazed. And Dax says, "Great, seat of the pants technology." Kira counters, "You Starfleet types are too dependent on your gadgets and gizmos. You lose your natural instincts for survival." And Dax responds, "My natural instincts for survival told me not to climb aboard this thing." And it still feels really weird to me that Dax is so out of her element, because she is very experienced, but she isn't experienced at getting in a tiny little cobbled together craft and flying with zero tech. She's used to the highest technology that the Federation has to offer. So it feels out of character for her, but I think there is good reason for it here. It's justified. And also, from a technical point of view, she's there to emphasize how good Kira is in this situation. Kira is extremely competent when a usually competent Federation staff member is not. She's out of her depth.
That's a really good point. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah, this is reminding us that Kira, well, there's a reason Kira survived the occupation, despite being, a known guerrilla fighter. It's because turns out she's really good at this. She's good at flying and fighting and surviving situations by the skin of her teeth. So yeah, I hadn't thought about that, but that's such an awesome land for her.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I really like this episode for Kira for showing off what she can do. They are then shot at. Dax uses a Starfleet tricorder-like thing to read the EM signature of the impulse engine, because the shuttle they're on doesn't have that. Kira initiates evasive maneuvers, and we get a great shot of the interior, which we have a picture of, through the windscreen of the vessel. Bajor swerving out of sight as the Raider moves. It's just a lovely way of showing how dynamically they're moving, and of course the two actors are moving backward and forward to show how the shuttle is moving. But it genuinely looks good. It does not look shonky.
No. Despite the fact it was made 30 years ago on a bit of a shoestring budget, comparatively, it does look really good. And I like that the cast also sway with it. I know Star Trek always has this odd relationship with how much kind of inertia you feel, because they're supposed to have magical inertial dampeners that mean you don't get turned into salsa every time they...
They're constantly going offline, though.
Right.
The only time you hear about them is when they're not
working. They're not working, yeah, exactly. So it's nice, though. It's a reminder, wow, these guys are really in basically a crate with wings. This is high tension stuff, so I really enjoyed that.
Two Bajoran shuttles then appear, firing on the raider. Kira remarks that these must be the welcoming committee from Jaro.
Yes.
Dax says we'll never outrun them in this. And then Kira uses sports metaphors, which I think are really misplaced. She says, you're right, we'll have to even the match. And Dax says, how do you intend to do that? New playing field. Is she meant to have picked this up from Sisko, or is this just the universal translator going awry? It's just a bit weird. It's not jargon that I would expect Kira to use.
No.
The metaphors are apt, they work here, but why is she using them?
That's a really good point. I just thought it was a corny line because I'm always a bit of a... I do hate hackneyed kind of metaphors, but you're right. It also has no business being in Kira's vocabulary.
Yeah, I think it's corny because it's so often used in American culture, or at least was in the 90s.
Yeah.
But yeah, it doesn't necessarily fit Bajoran culture so well. Actually, yeah, they could just have thrown in the name of Bajoran sport to make it.
That would have worked.
They didn't. Meh. Anyway, Kira says that they're taking them down to she's taking them down to the atmosphere. They won't be able to use their impulse engines down there. So if they want to fight, they'll have to fight on our terms. Dax looks very concerned, and then we cut to black. We open on the promenade with the lights still low.
Love that.
The camera turns to the doorway into the security office where Lee is crouched keeping watch while O'Brien is inside fiddling with something inside a panel. O'Brien removes something from that panel. I'm not sure that's ever touched upon. Presumably he's sabotaging something. He's removed a vital part from it before they're fired upon by Bajorans who are on the upper level looking down into the security office. O'Brien calls through to Sisko that they've got us pinned down in here. Sisko and his team then come through an airlock door where they're on the other side of the promenade. They can see shots being fired towards the security office, but they haven't been noticed.
Yes.
So Sisko starts drawing their attention by firing onto the Bajorans on the upper level. Meanwhile, a Bajoran member of Sisko's team pushes some buttons on a little gold ball he's holding and rolls it towards the security office, and it's a little smoke bomb. It's a really nice looking prop, which I didn't get a picture of, sadly. But the ball emits smoke, which obscures O'Brien and Lee, who then can take the opportunity to escape. They can't be fired upon because they're obscured. They leave the promenade. Odo looks towards where they're going. Then he hears Bajorans descending the stairs. So Odo stands in an archway and turns himself into a tripwire, which is the silliest looking thing. You need to see it in action. If you haven't rewatched the episode recently, please do. He shrinks down and then a bit of him extends outwards to form a tripwire. And it's a really springly tripwire as well. Again, molecular level structure there. And two Bajorans fall over it.
Right over it, yeah. It's amazing. I do feel like, that's supposed to be, I saved them, when it's like, these two are trained soldiers. Wouldn't they just stand up and carry on running? I appreciate that Odo gets the chance to save the day with his weird
he could have turned himself into a tar pit or something. He could have done lots of things that would incapacitate them more definitely than just going, oh no, I fell over. Well,
that's it, game over, I've got to go home. It's weird. But I get that they had to do something with Odo to, help. So fine.
And it is fun and unusual. He could have formed an impenetrable barrier. He could just have turned himself into a locked door in the archway, but no, tripwire. Got to respect the man's choice. So we then see the Bajoran who is on Sisko's team escaping and Sisko leaving too.
Yes.
We're back now on Bajor. It's daytime. The Raider is being pursued through the Bajoran sky by the two vessels that were pursuing it. Yep. Kira says they've gone to thrusters. That evens things up a little. Dax remarks if you consider 2 against 1 to be even. But Kira notes that the guys flying those ships used to be the guys flying these ships. So they're effectively outmatched here. Dax says that the phaser banks on their vessel are at full power, but the phaser locks are dead. There is no way to aim. Kira says, sure there is, and Dax replies, I know, seat of the pants. And Kira responds, with your eyes, Lieutenant, not your pants. Just point at them and fire. Which, again, they're doing a good job of bringing some comedy out of an extremely tense situation. They're being fired upon. These guys want them dead.
Yep.
They're chatting about pants. So they successfully take down one shuttle with phaser fire. The other continues to fire on them. Dax says the thruster power's falling. They must have hit a plasma conduit. Have we got any fire gear? Kira directs her to check under the seat, and she gets out this tiny little fire extinguisher, this little bronze thing, which squirts a tiny little jet of water, which then fails after a few seconds, which is lovely. We've said that they don't have any safety equipment. The Bajorans did. They thought about it. It's 10 years old and it's dried up.
Precisely.
So I liked that kind of gesture towards. They have thought about it, but it's old and it doesn't work very well.
It sets up the tension as well. It's like maybe this could save the day because it normally does on a starship, doesn't it? You get the phase modulator and your inverted tachyon pulse, and it saves the day. Here you get a water bottle that is dry. Well, I guess you're going to die then, you know, and that's it. You're like, oh wow, okay, these guys are really in trouble here. Brilliant, ratcheting up of tension.
It is. It's just a lovely degree of thought on the part of the script writers and the props team. So Kira ejects the plasma tank, which has been hit, and searches for somewhere to land. Dax can't see anywhere closer than 6 kilometers, but they do not have time, and both have to brace for impact. The time-honored way of bracing for impact, as they have to just head straight towards the land below them. We then come back to DS9, where Bajoran soldiers are in Quark's bar, which is still dark, but I really like that the large stained glass, that iconic thing that we use as our logo, is still lit, even when it's emergency lighting only. An officer calls today that one of the Ferengi holosuites is in use, and this plays out exactly as you might expect it to.
It's very obvious, isn't it? I mean, the guy walks into an obvious trap.
They know it's a holosuite. It's not even, we've seen movement in one of the rooms. Go into one of those. It's a holosuite. You're going to walk into something that's not real, guys. Be prepped. But no, they walk in and there's Sisko, Lee Nallis, and O'Brien sitting around a table. Then they go to stand up, and then they just freeze because they're freaking holograms. But by then, the doors have closed, and Day and 4 of his staff are stuck inside, which means that Sisko can now have a conversation with them over the comm. He explains, please listen very carefully. The Cardassians are supplying the weapons for this coup. And Day responds, ridiculous. No Bajoran would ever accept help from them. And Sisko carefully explains, Jarrow doesn't know. The Cardassians are using the Krasari to deliver the weapons to the Circle. And Day just keeps insisting, that is a Federation lie. So Sisko reiterates the situation, both for Day's benefit and for the audience's. The proof is on its way to Bajor. Once this evidence is presented, the coup will end. We don't want to fight you or hurt anyone. Your officers will be our guests for a while. I hope they won't mind Starfleet combat rations. And Day is then transported from the holosuite up to the transporter pad in Ops to join Krim. I do like some of the little touches in this. The mention of combat rations again, the way that it's well written as a comedy-heavy episode, that they keep harking back to bits of conversation that were had earlier. It feels as if it's been very carefully structured and written to include those things, which I appreciate in the midst of having to be very carefully clear about what is happening with so many moving pieces of the plot.
Yes, I would absolutely agree.
Krim then asks Day, Day, what the hell is going on? I wondered, do Bajorans have a hell? Assume this is the Universal Translator's rendering of it, but Bajor has a very religious culture. Maybe they have a what the hell's going on in their language. I don't know, but it's like whenever someone says, "Oh God," you're like, which God?
Absolutely.
Federation now. What is this?
Yeah, I'm sure Kira has previously said what the hell is going on, because she is the kind of person to
probably
curse. So let's put it down to a universal translator thing, because I know later on there is a conversation about gods, plural. So there will be a discussion of it. Anywhere else, it's just script writers not recalling us, not really noticing until we turn into the kind of analytical nerds that do a podcast about the show and pull an entire episode to pieces. Hi.
We can just put it down to the Universal Translator whenever they're hands. It's fine. Day says the Federation is behind all this, and he tells Krim that Sisko's spoken to him. So Krim asks, well, what did he say? And Day lies to him and says nothing of consequence. So Krim asks, why did he let you go? And Day says, I promised them amnesty, a promise I have no intention of keeping. And I've put in my notes, boo, he's a bad un.
Yeah, what have I said? The Colonel straight up lies about why Sisko released him, the scheming little twerp. So, I mean, again, I can only congratulate the actor, Weber, who played Day. Just brilliant. Absolutely squeezed every drop of hatred out of that character in just like a few short scenes. Bravo, loved it.
He did. And it's a really beautifully written and played contrast between him and Krim. Krim, who is on the wrong side, but reasonable, sensible, strategic. Even though he is the clever of the two, he is not the more dangerous of the two. This does feel more familiar for modern day. It's the fanatic who is more dangerous, the one who will just lie off the cuff and not really think it through.
That's absolutely what it is.
Yes, that's the unnamed female staff member once again coming to the rescue. I think they gave all of the lines to one actress to avoid paying anybody else. She says that the security net is back online. Krim tells her to scan for their communication devices because it's a really nicely worked out problem. This Day then says that the Cardassians used uranium composite to shield all of their conduits. So the problem solving has taken place. They know now that Sisko has a comm because he was speaking today. We know that they haven't been able to scan for where his comm badge is, so it must be in somewhere that's shielded. And Day's knowledge that they have the uranium composite around all the conduits tells them exactly where they are. It's beautiful. It's a really good example of the show's ability to make it make sense. It's not just, oh, I can guess this. I happened to see a doorway earlier that was clearly geranium. No, it's his genuine in-world knowledge of the station that's led us to this. I'm just really impressed by it. It's much better than a lot of television does it.
I can absolutely give you that. Can I give you a cherry on top as well?
Oh, please do.
It's a hark back to an earlier episode. In Captive Pursuit, when Tosk came aboard, O'Brien and Tosk escaped through the conduits where they could not be detected because, as O'Brien points out, the conduits are made of geranium, preventing
that's
scans.
Beautiful.
It's amazing, isn't it? What a nerdy reference. And, you would have had to have seen that episode to spot it. It doesn't matter if you didn't. It doesn't take away from the story at all. But if you saw it and you have the kind of weird retentive mind that we do, I recall the last time geranium composite was mentioned, and there it is. So there it is. It's a lovely reference.
Oh, well done for noticing that, Tim.
I don't know if that's something you should really celebrate. There are more useful things I could be remembering, but never mind. For the purposes of this episode, we're having a good time. That's all that matters.
It's lovely to appreciate these moments when they happen. But we now go back to Bajoran Forest at night. Dax creeps through the fern-like plants, coming back to Kira, who is lying, presumably injured. Dax says the Bajorans have found the raider. We can't stay here. Kira does the weary soldier thing, saying, "Go, I'll only slow you down. The important thing is to get the evidence to the provisional government." And Dax does the good soldier thing of saying it'll be more convincing coming from Kira. She insists on her standing up. Kira says that she'll have to leave her. That's an order, Lieutenant. And Dax points out the Federation officially left Bajor yesterday. You're no longer my commanding officer.
I love that. It's a very good point.
Kira says, "You're being a fool, Dax." And Dax says, "Don't talk to your elders that way."
That's awesome.
It's just so nice because the script could have been very utilitarian. Just these two having a short conversation of, we're going to go, I'm in too much pain. Well, you're coming with me anyway. Okay, then. No, they managed to pack it with information about who these two characters are, what their rank is in relation to each other, what the context is that they're in. It's very skillfully written to be from them. I appreciate just the level of detail they've gone to with that. It makes it so much more interesting.
It does. And I've said it before, but I love Dax Kira scenes in general. I think it's great that they get to play off each other, help each other, save each other, inform each other. They don't need a guy to do anything for them.
They easily pass the Bechdel test. They're constantly having conversations about what's going on in the shuttle, what they're doing, what their goal is. None of it has to revolve around a dude. It's great.
They have their own skills, experience. They can solve everything completely devoid of men. And although later on we do unfortunately have to rely on Bareil a bit, fine, I guess, but I'm sure they could have done it without him. So I just loved it. I really loved it. But please, crack us on, thank you.
Right, we hear the voices of male Bajorans and we see their legs passing Dax and Kira, who are crouched in the ferns just before Kira passes out in pain. We then cut it. I like the way that it keeps cutting between these two and the station. It really keeps the tension high in both places. We cut to the conduit where Sisko and his crew are hiding. Odo calls through on the comm saying, "I hope you're not still on level 5. Sisko says, "No, we're on 3Y. And Odo says, because they're about to fill the conduits with anesthetizine gas, starting with level... Anesthetizine is a really lovely lazy coinage of a word. It gets across exactly what it is. It's an anesthetizing gas.
But it sounds
they made it
Star
sound a bit
Trek.
more futuristic, yeah.
Release the Technobabble fumes.
So it is a good example of it. It works very quickly. It does what it's intended to. O'Brien says that that's a good idea. It's an idea he might have come up with in that situation. Sisko is concerned that they haven't heard from Kira and Dax by now. And O'Brien points out that if they didn't make it, we're all fighting for a lost cause up here. Sisko says we still have an ace in the hole, which again, I disliked because it's corny. We haven't seen
Yeah.
Sisko playing cards. It's just it's a very lazy metaphor, which could have been more imaginative.
Agreed.
But yeah, Lee Nallis looks uncomfortable and says, "Me?" Sisko then tells O'Brien to prepare units to move out, so that O'Brien is out of the way for him to explain to Lee that the coup depends on the support of the military. And Lee says, "Do you think I can sway the generals?" And Sisko says he's only concerned with the general who is here on the station, Krim, that he has picked the wrong side and we've got to convince him of that. And I like this. I like that they've reverted to a diplomacy-based strategy that feels very Star Trek.
Yes,
It is. If they have been based in cunning and guerrilla warfare, they've done a very good job so far. But it's got to be about persuading rather than overpowering someone. Sisko said, "Would you rather follow a politician or Bajor's greatest war hero?" And Lee starts saying, "Well, I'd die for my people." And Sisko interrupts, "Sure you would. Dying gets you off the hook. The question is, are you willing to live for your people? Live the role they want you to play. That's what they need for you right now." And this is pulling on that thread that's run through these 3 episodes. Lee Nallis, what he is, what he has done, what he's going to become. I feel that it is very. I don't particularly like the Lee Nallis story. I don't find it very compelling or interesting, but it is well woven into this Deep Space Nine story.
It is, and I like that they gave Sisko what I think is a brilliant line, which is, "Sure, you're willing to die for them, but are you willing to live for them?" Because it's such a great antidote to that whole concept of, oh well, yeah, I'll die and go down in a blaze of glory, and it's like that doesn't make a difference. That actually won't help in this situation. It'll possibly make things worse. Yes. So it's a refresh on that idea, and you could read it in a wider context, which is a lot of Bajorans were willing to sacrifice themselves, and it did eventually lead to the end of the occupation, possibly, but. Hasn't enough been sacrificed? Are you really going to sacrifice yourself now here so that the Cardassians can come back? You can read very deeply into this as a very valid criticism of extremism of guerrilla warfare, of causes and what you're willing to give up for them and what you get back for them.
Yeah.
You could run for miles with that. And Sisko sums it up perfectly in one line, which is, maybe dying for the cause isn't the right thing. Maybe if you live, you can make a difference.
Yes,
I just
absolutely.
love it.
Oh, my 90s mind is also going back to, unfortunately, another Whedon script where Buffy the Vampire Slayer is tempted to jump through a portal, which may or may not take her back to heaven, which she was recently cast out of.
Okay.
And Dawn, her younger sister, says to her, the hardest thing in this world is to live in it, effectively telling her, staying here is the hard thing. It is the right thing. You've got to stay and fight with us.
Same sentiment, definitely. I'll give you that. And there were some great bits in Buffy. There were some bad bits in Buffy, just like there are great and bad bits in DS9.
I'm increasingly the more Star Trek I see, the more I'm convinced that Joss Whedon, geek that he is, watched a lot of Star Trek and took quite a few notes from it.
I would absolutely agree.
I think that this thread may have been one that he picked up from here.
Nice, I like that parallel. Thank you.
Yes. We then cut to Kira suddenly waking up in bed going, "Oh!" And Vedek Bareil, I like this. He is sitting at the other side of the room looking out of the window. He's there with her. He's there to make sure she's safe. He isn't steadily creeping at her from he's not sitting there at the foot of the bed staring at her or holding her hand or with his hand on her head. He's at a respectful distance, which I think, for TV in the 90s, I just appreciate that. I appreciate that he's not being a creeper. He's actually being a good guy. Bareil tells her that she's safe. She's at the monastery. The whole city saw her ship go down, and the people who found her were from his order, which is a very nice little twist. We assumed that the people who were looking for them were allied with the people in the 2 shuttles, but no, it was actually Bareil's people out looking for them because everyone knows that she's there, or that someone came down there. Kira struggles upright, insists that they've got to get to the Chamber of Ministers. Bareil supports her up and they stand close face to face with their arms around each other. And he looks super awkward again. I think there's meant to be sexual tension there, but it's not been earned. And the actor, bless him, is doing his best. I think he's kind of doing the shy schoolboy looking away thing, but it just looks awkward. It looks like they don't know each other very well and they're now in too close a proximity. There isn't any chemistry between these 2 characters, unfortunately, and I think it is the fault of the script rather than the actors.
It will be interesting. I'm sure you've gathered by now that Vedek Bareil will be returning because he didn't get killed at the end of this. So
Yes,
obviously the intention is to bring him back. So it will be interesting to see how you feel about this emerging relationship, because so far we've chimed absolutely on the scriptwriters are trying to force an emerging relationship too quickly here between these two characters. So yeah, I absolutely agree. I also found this clumsy, a bit wooden, very hard to believe. So yeah, I can only agree with you there. But thankfully, it is over relatively quickly, and they part, and we're back on with the episode. And even if it wasn't going to be, Dax finally arrives as a chaperone anyway, so we're okay.
Although one thing I did notice that it's possible the scriptwriters are going for a kind of thematic parallel, that we've got Winn and Jarrow on one side, and then we've got Bareil and Kira on the other side. It might be an intentional mirroring of the differences between those two pairs.
I'd never thought of that. That's a really good comparison. I'd 100% agree.
Yeah, I'm not sure how well it works. I don't think it justifies the speed with which Kira has pictured him naked and is then suddenly in his arms, but we'll see how it develops. But yes, he asks her to be careful. She's just had a broken hip mended, which again, the speed of medicine in this place. She was injured very recently, and she's now almost completely recovered. As Kira's heading to the door, as you say, Dax enters. We've got a picture of her wearing full Bajoran religious garb, which is just as in the prophecy.
As the prophecy foretold.
Indeed, she's now here wearing full headgear, which she has to wear the full wraparound face headgear to cover her trill marks.
Oh, yes.
So she can't get away with just the sash, which Kira puts on. She has to wear the full headgear. And she's also got a Bajoran style nose, and she asks Kira whether it suits her. And Dax says, "Oh yes, very flattering." And Dax replies, "I'm thinking of keeping it." Which again, it's just a lovely little moment between the characters that needn't have been in there. They could just have dashed out of the room as soon as they've explained why they need the uniform.
Yep.
Incidentally, the uniform is because they need to get to the Chamber of Ministers, and Bareil says that only religious officiants can walk the streets safely at the moment. So this will get them into the building. We then cut to Bashir, who's in a conduit, arguing with Quark. He says, "Quark, leave it," which sounds like he's giving instructions to a naughty dog. Quark is pushing his very heavy suitcase. He's like, "I can't leave it. It's all that I am. My personal mementos, my family album." Bashir says, "It's full of gold-pressed latinum, and you know it." I really like that one line. "It's all that I am." It's deeper than I expect from Quark, but also incredibly shallow. It's all of his worldly wealth, and that represents his self. Yeah. Oh, bless him. I am really enjoying how the Ferengis are portrayed in Deep Space Nine so far. They are a lot of fun, and they are being given more shrift than they have been previously. I think even though Quark is largely there for comedy value in this episode and in others, I appreciate that their culture is being fleshed out, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of it.
You will get it. You will get it. That's no spoiler at all, but there are very Ferengi-heavy episodes coming up, and I can't wait for us to get to them and see what you think. I am just going to quickly note in chat that Dennis Bloodnock, who's just joined us, remarked on that last scene of Kira and Dax with their arms on each other's shoulders, and he just says, "Kiss her. Yell and kiss her." And he's like, "Oh no, my slash
That's a really
brain."
nice point, actually. Yeah. There is actually a very good point, because you've got that parallel within that scene of Kira with Bareil and then Kira with Dax, framed slightly differently. That could have been a very deliberate. Yeah.
I mean,
which way will Kira go?
Right. I mean, this is Star Trek, right? Infamously, we were talking about the unification short just before we jumped in, and obviously we know that for Vulcans, touch is very intimate, and so when Jim Kirk grasps Spock's hand, it's a very significant moment if you read deeper into kind of Vulcan interactions. So we know that there is this certainly this fan base, urge, and we've only just finished talking about Bashir and Garak, and we will come back to Bashir and Garak so many times. Garashir is a thing, so why not Dira, Cax? I think Dira. Let's stick with Dira. So yeah, I think it's a perfectly reasonable read, and frankly, I love it when people do ship characters together, even characters I never would have seen myself, because I just think it's a great way to interact with a fiction. Why the hell not? Take it and run with it.
Oh, definitely. Well noticed, Dennis.
I see it. I just wanted to acknowledge that, I hadn't seen that myself, and now that he pointed out...
Yeah, it's there, man. Hell yeah.
Love
I am very happy to write any. I think there is genuinely a lot of subtext in Star Trek. I think there probably were queer writers putting these undertones in. Rick Berman was famously against it.
Yes.
But yeah, then we've obviously had cases of actors coming out on behalf of their characters and saying, yes, we were playing this up romantically.
100%. 100%.
I think it's yeah, as you say, Tim, I think it's always legitimate because it's fun and because I think it is there. It's not just in our imaginations. But yes, Quark is still currently in the conduit. And Bashir has just said that the suitcase is full of gold-pressed latinum. Quark says,
Who told you that?
Bashir responds, your mother did the day you were born. Your mother! What the fuck, Bashir?
It is one of the sickest burns in fiction. Probably all Star Trek. And it's Bashir.
And I love Quark's response to it. He pushes the suitcase towards her and scampers threateningly forwards in the tube. Says, never, just never insult a Ferengi's mother. What was it? Rule of acquisition number 31. Oh my God! Which I like. It is a bit of character building for Quark. I'm unfortunately aware that I think we do get his mum at some point in the future. But yeah, I like that there's that familial tie. I like that he doesn't. Although Ferengi culture is very patriarchal, we haven't seen any female Ferengi characters yet. I appreciated Quark getting angry on behalf of his mum when Bashir has slighted her.
And of all the people to do it, I mean, just that whole scene is beautiful, and because it comes out of bloody nowhere. I don't think Bashir and Quark have had that many scenes together. It's mainly been.
The only one that springs out was that when Bashir was treating him in a previous
when
episode,
he got branded,
he had the brand burn on him.
That's all that
and he was telling
him,
keep still, and he was being annoyed with him. I feel like it's that same dynamic here.
Yes,
Bashir,
absolutely.
Who's much younger and less experienced in life, who's nonetheless very reasonably annoyed with this goddamn guy. It's endlessly irritating. But yes, Sisko then calls through on the comm. Bashir says that we're above airlock 14 awaiting his signal. Sisko tells him, make as much noise as you can before you surrender, Doctor. Bashir says, we'll make them think there are 200 of us here instead of 20. So Bashir out, and he then mutters 21 before insisting that Quark hurries along. Quark then says that he's coming, looks back at his case, he considers leaving it, but then he just keeps pulling it with him. Insists that he's not leaving without it.
Brilliant.
We then go back to Ops, which is still occupied by the Bajoran soldiers. Female staff member, goddamn, I wish she had a name, says that the enemy have attacked their position at airlock 1. Day is pleased, saying we must have flushed them out. He orders the docking clamps be locked and all security units to airlock 14. Again, this is just good practical stuff, making sure that they can't leave. Has no effect on the plot, but it makes sense that he says it at this point, so he does. The surveillance cameras down there have been sabotaged. For all that there aren't many of them. The surveillance cameras are a really weird thing in Deep Space Nine. They're very plot specific. Wherever you need them, they're not working.
And you'd think the Kardashians wouldn't they have like as many as we do in the UK? They're paranoid, security conscious people. Wouldn't they be everywhere?
You would think part of their culture would be, spying on each other to make sure they're doing the work properly. It would make sense, but I think it's just you don't want to have endless scenes of people watching security footage. There are a lot, but there are a lot of scenes where Odo does
do that.
Back. So anyway, we need more actual security cameras that actually work. Yes, Colonel Day then calls through only seconds after leaving Hops to say that the enemy at the airlock 14 have surrendered. He's taken several prisoners. So basically he arrived there and they surrendered immediately. They didn't, because they weren't going to fire on the Bajorans, obviously.
No.
Krim says to bring them up there to him for questioning. And as soon as Krim enters Sisko's office, O'Brien raises a phaser at him from one side of the room. Lee speaks to him from the other with Sisko behind him. The three of them have crept in and are hiding there. Lee tells Krim that they don't want to use deadly force, and he says, my name is Lee Nallas. Perhaps you've heard of me. And from Krim's facial expression, it's clear that he does. We then go back to Bajor again. We're in the Chamber of Ministers, which we have a picture of. It's an impressive set. And I think it is very clearly a stage set because it's surrounded by darkness. Even within this shot, unusually, although it's not on a space station, it is framed as if it is just sitting in a void, which I like. I like the impression of it. And I also like that the shape of it broadly is the same shape as Vedek Winn's hat. It's got that kind of triangular look to it,
it does,
which I think is a coincidence. I don't think it's a deliberate reference, but I appreciate it nonetheless. And the Chamber of Ministers looks a lot more orderly than it did in Kira's prophecy. It's not just people everywhere. They're sitting around a table as if they're speaking to each other. It makes sense for it to be laid out that way. Kira, Dax, and Linalis arrive. Kira starts taking off her religious garb, and Winn says, "What is this blasphemy?" presumably referring to religious wear. There is a shot missing, which is in the script. Dax sees Winn stare, shrugs, takes off her hat, and hands it to Barial, who exchanges an even look with Winn. I think the reason they couldn't is because there are so many people in the room that trying to get that shot in while implying that there are still people sitting around. I think they just couldn't do it, or they couldn't fit it into the runtime. It's a shame because it sounds like a nice little moment of recognition between some of the characters, but they couldn't do it. Kira then says, "I am Major Kira Nerys, and I've come with proof that the Cardassians are behind Minister Jarrow's attempts to take control of the government." And Jarrow is remarkably calm. He responds, "Major Kira has long been an outspoken opponent of the provisional government, of reason, of progress, and now finally of me." Three-part list, Tony Blair. "I'm honoured to be included, Major, but I have no intention of allowing you to disrupt the orderly transition of power with these wild charges." And it was at this point that I really thought that, he's calculating, he is clever, he is very good and very efficient at what he does. And I think at this moment more than at any other, when he's suddenly surprised and he still comes out with this very well put together little speech. Kira holds up the manifest pad from the Krasari vessel, that thing that they kept insisting on taking pictures of in the last episode.
Here it is, look at it.
Look at where he's gone. Look at what Oda's picking up now. Look, Oda's holding it again. And it is because it's the MacGuffin that is, at this moment, it becomes hugely necessary that this physical object is passed over. Absolutely. I still feel that it still feels very silly that so much was made of it previously. But I think it's just unusual in Star Trek that it is a pad, because we live in a future where this information can just be transmitted. But then comms are down, they couldn't just have told. Anyway, MacGuffin of the day, pad, Krasari vessel, has a thumb scan for a Cardassian Gull who transferred weapons to that ship. And at that moment, some of the ministers in the background start looking aghast and talking to each other. I love it. The extras are properly responding to what is being said in the room. They're not all just sitting quietly waiting for it to finish. It feels as if it really lives. They're responding as they would.
As they would naturally, yeah.
Kira continues, "Those weapons were taken by the Krasari to the Circle. This coup will deliver Bajor back into the hands of its greatest enemies." The script says greatest enemy, meaning the Cardassians, and I think it actually hits harder if you say our greatest enemy rather than enemies.
Yeah, I would agree with that, actually. Yes, the great enemy, is something you can immediately fixate on a truly monolithic, nightmarish adversary, which the Cardassians absolutely represent at this point.
Yeah, definitely. But it's a speech to remember. Actress added one letter to the end of it. I can't be too angry. I also feel that the scene was diminished somewhat because normally with a speech like this, as with Sisko's at the top of the episode, it would be shot in one camera shot. We would follow her around the room. But because there are so many ministers in that room, she needs to walk around and appeal to all of them. So they do it in several different camera shots. They move the cameras around and they shoot her from different angles. And presumably Nana Visitor had to deliver it several different times, or different parts of it different times, which is a shame because I think it diminishes the impact of what she is saying, or it diminishes the fact that she's saying it. The fact that she's delivering one smooth speech and she's looking around, she's appealing to everyone. It's more chopped up, but I think it's a necessity of the small space. I think that once again it is just because there are too many people on set. They couldn't do that without going behind people's heads at some point, so they've sadly had to chop it up. But I miss it. I'm looking forward to seeing more Deep Space Nine based episodes where they have those long camera shots. They're
will be back.
Obsession of mine. I love them. I love that they do something. This episode has been necessarily choppier, and I do think it's because of the number of extras on set.
I would agree, sadly.
But yes, Jarrow just says, "I assure you there is nothing to these accusations." And Winn, the shooting script says, but quite simply, Winn has put some distance between herself and Jarrow. She is now closer to Kira than to Jarrow. I don't think that quite kind of copies on screen. But Winn does say, "Then you should have no objection to an inspection of this manifest, Minister." And at that point, I kind of had to remind myself, nobody in that room wants the Cardassians to be involved. It's genuinely come as a shock to everybody. It's not that that was part of Jarrow's plan all along.
That's a good
It's
point.
that, oh God, no, the plan's gone wrong. I'm delivering us back to the Cardassians. And Winn, as soon as it started to go south, she's stepped away from Jarrow. She's no longer on his side. She's now on whichever side is most favourable to her. It's a nice moment.
Yeah, I've got, in the slimiest changes of sides ever, Winn says we should review the evidence. And, you know, it reminds us as well that, yeah, you know, Jarrow saying all the right things and being like, there's nothing to it. I fully intend to cooperate, he says later, as any politician always says whenever they're exposed to something. And Winn is immediately like, well, you know, then we shall review this and give it our full attention. They're both consummate, accomplished, professional politicians saying all the words you would expect to hear in this situation. It's brilliant and it's sickening. And you're like, Winn, you worm, you're going to get away from this. Nobody's going to know how cozied up and how you were seconds from being a co-dictator.
This is the thing. She could have stepped up and said, yeah, she could have spoken in his favour, saying clearly Minister Jarrow was not aware of this. Anything that falls out of this investigation will not be on his shoulders. She could have done that. She has the authority to do that, the position to do that. No, she's just immediately distancing herself from him in the public eye.
She's got like a sixth sense. She's like, this is going to go badly. I'm not going to let this guy pull me down. I'm a survivor. I'm going to get out of this, and she does.
And sadly, I'm aware that she comes back for more episodes. I don't think he does.
Not to my knowledge.
Not for many, if any. But yes, the crowd then clamours. Many of them start speaking to Kira with their voices audible, but not what they're saying. Which is another clear reference to the prophecy. I was a bit sad that the prophecy is cleared up so quickly. I think this moment in the Chamber of Ministers is more or less everything that the prophecy was pointing towards. Bar her being naked with
Barial. Yes.
But who knows? Maybe one of the cutscenes. But yeah, I think, God, I'm really weeding heavy tonight. I'm sorry for whatever reason. This episode kept reminding me of bits of the Buffyverse.
Okay.
There is an episode that falls at the end of one of the seasons of Buffy, which contains a lot of. It's a dream sequence, several dream sequences. Lots of the characters have dreams, which contain imagery, which then comes up in the next season of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's very satisfying, and it's not strictly literal. It's not hugely direct. But there's enough there that you can genuinely pull out of it and say, God, he foreshadowed that. This is right at the beginning of a new season, and they could have put things into a prophecy that could have played out over the weeks and months of it being screened. And they didn't. They gave Kira her first and thus far only prophecy, and it's wrapped up in a 3-episode arc. And I feel a little bit sad about that. It feels a bit like a wasted opportunity. It feels a little bit too clean, a little bit too pat, a little bit too, well, we showed you this was going to happen, and now it's done.
It has happened. On to the next one. Right at the top of the episode, I think we both talked about how we did feel the ending of this was a little bit
rushed,
A little bit rushed. And this is a good point. And I would just say that this has to be taken in context of, this must have been the first time they'd ever pitched such a long arc to a Star Trek show. Well, it is, you know, there's never been a three-episode arc in any TNT or the original series. So I can imagine the showrunners and Paramount were all like, this isn't going to work. What are you doing? You're still finding your feet. You know, you haven't yet gotten out the shadow of TNG. So I imagine there had to be some compromise where they were like, look, we will absolutely tie this up, and we will be back to the status quo that I know you love, you know, so we can have another brand new adventure where nothing's ever changed. Yeah,
because they're used to the audience having their satisfaction at the end of each episode, not having to wait a week. So yeah, to plant things which you then say, they won't find out for a couple of months yet what's going on here. Yeah, you're probably right. It just wouldn't fly with the studio execs.
Precisely. What can you do?
We can cut to Crimin Ops.
Yes. Can I say one more thing? We were talking about that Bajoran official in Ops who always gives the updates. Yes. Can I shout out an even less appreciated person, which is Jarrow's assistant, who is a striking woman with wonderful hair. She's been in every episode that Jarrow has, always with him.
God, she's never looking worried.
Yes, she doesn't get one line, not one line.
Damn.
And she has to walk out the room with him at the end. No doubt her career in ruins, because she was, you know, assistant to Jarrow. And she had nothing to say in all that time. So, God damn it. Very cruel.
Big up to that unnamed extra. I sometimes do try to find the names of the extras on Memory Alpha, but they're unprinted.
Yeah.
Unless you can try and track down the face on IMDb.
Great job.
Of the names are just not known, which is such a shame because they're for several episodes and not a word spoken in them. Oh, bless her.
Criminal.
Well, thank you for bringing her up too. I'm glad that she got mentioned here.
But yes, on to Ops.
Yeah, we're in Ops. Day and another soldier travel up in the turbo lift. They're escorting Bashir and Quark. Krim says, Colonel, you deliberately withheld information that was to be communicated to me. He's been found out.
Yes, justice.
Information. And Krim says, regarding the Cardassians. And Day's eyes wander as he thinks about what he's going to do. And he just says, lies, that's all they were. But Krim says, we've been told the chamber is in recess while evidence of the Cardassian involvement is being explored. So the plots have just lined up very happily here, that shortly after Lee Nallis has explained the situation to Krim, it has been further evidenced by what's going on in the Chamber of Ministers. Yes, Sisko says, the circle is broken, Colonel, which is a lovely phrase. I like that it gets to say the circle is broken.
It's a great line.
Krim says he's returning to the surface immediately to consult with the ministers, and he says, I expect I will be asked to resign. He then turns to Sisko and says, Commander, since the provisional government has prevailed, I believe it is appropriate to return the command of this station to Starfleet. He then turns to Lee Nallis and says, well fought, sir, which is a sweet moment. And then I love Day's acting in this bit, Stephen Weber. His lip trembles as he's looking around. He's desperately upset about what's going on. And he just says, no. He takes out his phaser and aims it at Sisko. O'Brien sees and calls, Commander! And Lee jumps into the path of the phaser fire towards Day, knocking him to the floor. Day pushes him off him, staggers up. Lee is there lying on his back. And we ignore what happens today. I assume that he's held by some of the other Bajoran officers.
Odo steps in and disarms him.
Odo grabs him. Thank you. I didn't
his
spot
wrist.
that.
And he makes his last noises are really pitiful. And then eventually crushes his fist, crushes his wrist, and he drops his gun. And he goes, You go back and have a listen. It's great. It's really wimpy.
That's a fitting end for that character. I like that very much. Yeah, I was focusing too much on what's happening with Lee.
You meant to, of course.
But he's lying on his back. Sisko quickly comes to his side. Him and Bashir both put a hand behind his head so that his face can be seen on camera. Practical thing. And Sisko's got one hand behind his head, one hand holding one of Lee's hands, while Bashir scans Lee with a tricorder. Unusually, Bashir doesn't have any lines while he's scanning him. The important thing here is to focus on Lee himself. And he lives long enough to gasp for a bit, then smile and say, off the hook, after all. Another nice callback to that bit of the episode where Sisko said that dying would be being off the hook. You've got to live. He lives for a few more seconds, and then the tricorder goes, beep. Flatlining noise, which it never fucking does. It's just to save Bashir having to do a slightly pathetic, he's gone, sir.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like you just get the beep and silence, which I think is fitting for this scene, even though I don't think it'll ever happen again.
Yeah, I don't know, actually. We'll have to keep our eyes out. It does, to me, just remind me of Bashir in one of his most disagreeable moments going, modern tricorders, they just don't even tell you if people are alive or dead. And I'm like, well, they clearly fucking do, mate, because that was the clearest.
We're going to rely on them every time someone dies, so they're going to have to.
Yeah, and then there was no arguing with that noise. My God, that noise was horrendous.
Wouldn't it have been amazing if Lee had just coughed and come back to life a few moments later, and then Bashir would have gone, these things don't actually work.
Oh, yeah. To the white man, that was the flat battery alarm. It needed charging. I'm so sorry, everyone.
God, but they're not going to live down that damn scene where Bashir says that tricorder.
I will never forget it. I will never forget it. It was the weirdest goddamn thing ever. The tricorder does everything that the plot requires it to do. So don't give me that crap.
You can't give us doubt about the tricorder, man. Everything lies on it. Oh. Anyway. We then cut to the exterior of Deep Space Nine, then to Kira in Quarks. She's looking deeply sad, and Kira talks about how, having come here, Lee was going to make things better. He was a man who could do that, a great man. I wish I knew where we could find others like him. And Sisko says, Major, there are heroes all over Bajor. I'm sitting with one. And she responds, I'm sorry, I don't feel like celebrating tonight, excuse me. And she just leaves, which It's deeply sad. It's the end of an heroic arc for her.
Yeah.
And she cannot enjoy it because this man that she greatly respects has died. It
Yeah.
feels really appropriate.
Yeah, it does.
And a little bit sad. I'm very glad that they follow it up with the dialogue that they did with O'Brien, who has started to cotton on, starts talking about Lee Nallis, saying that the guy that he met is not the same guy that Kira was describing. And Sisko cuts him off and says, Chief, Lee Nallis was the hero of the Bajoran resistance. He performed extraordinary acts of courage for his people and died for their freedom. That's how the history books on Bajor will be written. And that's how I'll remember him when anybody asks.
Yep.
O'Brien just says, yes, sir. But I feel sorry for O'Brien in that moment because he knows that something was up, but he's never going to know exactly what it was. He doesn't know what was off about Lee Nallis, exactly what the lie was. But yeah.
Yeah, it is a tricky one, and it's good. It's the thorny, knotty ethical question that should be at the heart of every good Star Trek episode. I would say that O'Brien possibly might have more of an understanding than we give him credit, because his great standout TNG episode was The Wounded, where he had to deal with former colleagues who were so marred by their own Cardassian war experiences that they became something else. And so he might draw a parallel with somebody like Captain Robert Maxwell, his former commander, who went mad and went off on a crusade against the Cardassians.
Oh, well remembered, yes.
Well, I think it's such a great episode, and it addresses the horrors of war. And so you would see in O'Brien an ability to perceive that somebody can be something different to what they are before and after something as traumatic as war. So I can kind of see it. I think it's right as well to show, even in a Star Trek episode that's trying so hard to get back to the text quo, to show, no, this has an impact. This has a legacy. Yes. Lee Nallis was not what we expected, but in the moment he was what we needed.
Yeah, that's a good read on it.
Yeah, and he paid the ultimate price. And actually, we can't just be like, well, all's well that ends well, government's back. It's like, no, somebody died unnecessarily, and that is not something to be swept under the carpet. So it's right.
And importantly, that will have been one of the final nails in the coffin of the Circle, that they killed the great hero Lee Nallis, who opposed them. Yeah.
Bingo. It's a bit of a shame that the episode doesn't do more about that. It doesn't do more about Jarrow. It doesn't do more about the Cardassian involvement. That should be screamed from star to star. The Cardassians tried to stage a coup on Bajor.
I want fucking Gul Dukat looking, I didn't know any of this was happening. Yeah. How terrible.
No, all of it just comes to a stop there and then. And we get this lovely scene with O'Brien, Sisko and Kira, but it does feel like a lot of other threads are just like tied up off screen. So, I get that you wanted to get back to the status quo, but it almost undersells the rest of the episode. That it all just gets so neatly tied up.
Yeah, and it does for me evoke all of the Star Trek films where a crew member is introduced and then killed off because they wanted the emotional beat and they didn't want to kill a cast member. So yeah, I do think that narratively it hangs together remarkably well.
Yeah,
with so many moving parts, so much action between Bajor and the station. It is very, very well written. And I do actually like the ending. There's one last scene to go.
Yes, of course.
Because I think they could have chosen to end it in Quarks and had the remaining characters after Kira's left raise it. Yeah, they could have all raised glasses to Lee Nallis and to their victory and then clinked glasses and end that. But they don't. They end on people arriving back from the airlock. There's a call goes out over the comms saying that the shuttle has arrived.
Yes.
So Miles excuses himself to go back to Keiko.
Yes.
Sisko then follows him to greet Jake. And when he greets Jake steps out of the airlock, which is set slightly above the step down, and he hugs him and picks him up and swirls him around.
Great, isn't it?
Feet are off the floor for a moment. And then they walk away together with one arm each around the other. It's beautiful. And I think that was a very deliberate choice in the philosophy of the show. We're not going to end on, yes, a great military victory, hurrah, rightness prevails. This is about people, and this is about people living safe, peaceful lives, and that is what we're celebrating at the end of this episode. That's the important thing. I really enjoyed that. I think it ended on the right note.
I would agree. I guess it's, for me, I'm always looking at what is the bigger picture, but that comes from a position of, I know how this works, so I'm always curious about what's going on off screen. What is the show referencing? So thank you, Kat. You have, in the end, refreshed, once again, my perspective on Star Trek, which is the whole point of this damn podcast, that we have different views. So, and there we are. We are at the end of the episode. So we could just squeak in at 2 hours. Neat. If you have any closing thoughts you want to fly through.
One thing I wanted to do is go back to my predictions. In the I think at the end of the first episode, I made some predictions about how I thought things were going to go for Lee Nallis.
Bring it on!
I
am
was
excited.
broadly right. I predicted that he might find a use for himself, and that he might have a character arc of developing a skill or showing a skill that he already had that would be useful. And he did in persuading Krim, the Cardassian involvement. And he got assassinated by a member of the Circle. I think both of these things were something useful he did, and he got killed off, which I guess it would be one or the other. In the end, we got both, so I feel that's a double win for me. As I said earlier, I'm disappointed that the prophecy was wrapped up so quickly. It could have been used to hint at so much more, but I think it was well used in terms of what it was and what they wanted it to do. And they didn't overplay it either. At no point in this episode did Kira go, just like in the prophecy. It's left for the audience to put that together, which is nice. I like that they give the audience that much credit that we will remember that the prophecy occurred and we will tie together what the imagery was. That's unexpected and quite pleasant. And I'm looking forward to seeing what Winn will get up to next. Because she's there. She's evil. Shouldn't. She's great. She's so much fun to watch.
You shouldn't.
I'm going to regret that.
No spoilers, chat. No spoilers. The Indoor Cat does exactly point out that Lee Nallis did indeed serve his purpose and crucially saved the show from having to add yet another named cast member with all the money they would have had to pay.
They've already got Major Kira. They don't need another person in her role.
That was the plot, yeah.
It could have gone back to Bajor. He could have, stepped up and become a member of the government, but nah. Death for that guy for emotional resonance.
He was cut down by a writer's phaser. A Star Trek trope felled him in his prime. What a shame.
A red shirt.
So I think we came away ultimately, happy with the Circle trilogy. So.
Yeah, it was. I think the second episode was the strongest of the three.
Agreed.
Because it had the most development, the most they did what moments. It's the episode of Deep Space Nine that surprised me most so far.
What an accolade! That's very cool.
Yeah.
You will have to put that in your notes, and we will review that when we get to the end of season 3, which is not as far away as it was tonight. So,
but I unfortunately I saddened myself earlier this week by realizing the next Garak episode is not the next one we'll be watching, but the one after it. So yes, with all haste, we must move to the next episode so I can get to more of that good Cardassian Taylor goodness.
Yes, indeed. We cannot wait to get there. So we will return with, I believe, Invasive Procedures, which is the next episode, and we will hopefully be back in a couple of weeks to our run through that, and then in about a month we should be finally on to the elaborately named, imaginatively titled Cardassians of season 3 of Deep Space Nine. But beyond that, I would like to thank everyone in chat who has, as always, engaged so fluently with us. We really appreciate you all being here, especially Lieutenant Indoor Cat, our moderator and maintainer of Backroom Technologies. It's much appreciated. That's it. We've neatly come in at just 2 hours, 1 minute, so I'm going to wish everyone the very best. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will be back here again on Twitch in a couple of weeks' time. So take care, live long, and prosper, everyone. Farewell.
Bye, everyone.